All right. This is what's up. Bueno y bienvenidos to the Estás en el Puro Wyoming podcast, the EPW podcast. This is the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, for all things Latino education, politics, culture, and more. We are joined with some very special guests today. So typically we've got the carnales, Andrew Benitez and Antonio Vigil, but they're taking a little sabbatical, which is dope because the whole idea is to invite more voices from the Latino community to come join us. And man, we've got some badass voices today. Joining us, like last time, was our main man, our engineer, our sound recorder, the power behind the pass, if you will. Whoa. This place that we're recording it is called the Power of the Pass, as in like El Paso Power of the Pass. The power behind the pass with his McCafe. Give it up for Richie!
Yeah, no advertising involved whatsoever there with the cafe, but man, for me, power means the shade of power I love most is creation, and that's what we do here at Power at the Pass. And
absolutely,
it's good to be back. That episode we recorded last time here was super fun.
It was, man.
To be back.
It was good times.
Yeah.
And we've got not only like the dope sounds, but we even like got the dope recording. So now you all know how ugly I am and how good looking Richie and Joey is. So speaking of which, we've got the carnal. I've known this man since I was 15. You were 17?
17.
Wow, man. It's been a long time. That's crazy. That's amazing.
95.
Yeah. And I think that is the power, if you will, of the topic that we're going to discuss today, the National Hispanic Institute. But I want to introduce my man, Dr. Joseph Villescas.
Thank you, Omar. It's great to be here, and it's great to be with Richie, and then, of course, our guest on the line as well.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for
So
having me.
I'm going to ask you guys just a little bit about how your week was, and we're going to touch on Celebración. But we got the carnal on the phone, I think, driving on the I-35 corridor as we speak,
Inching along
from Maxwell, Texas to Austin, Texas, the ATX. Julio Cotto, are you in the house, man? Where you at?
Making the daily journey, the daily voyage from Maquis to Austin.
From Maquis to Austin. You making the donuts, bro? Is that what's going on?
They don't make donuts there, man. They make buñuelos.
That's what's up, dude. Dude, speaking of buñuelos, man, it's almost Christmas, dude. What the fuck? I want some buñuelos now.
I want some coquito.
Ah, it's delicious, man. So very proud to have the carnales on the show this week. Usually I always spit it to my man V about what we're ranting about, but I'm going to be the one that talks a little bit about what we're ranting about today. So there is a common connection that we have here, Julio, Joseph, and I, and that common connection is an organization called the National Hispanic Institute. It's an organization that started way back in 1979. I had the honor of participating in 1994. Joey, you started in
93.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
And
with your mom.
That's right, who is the project director at the time here in El Paso. And Julio, when did you get started with NHI, man?
Junior year for me of high school, 1997 in New Mexico, with many people from El Paso.
Was that at Highlands or was that at UNM?
It was at UNM in Albuquerque.
All right. For our listeners, University of New Mexico, Highlands University in Las Vegas. Wait for it. Las Vegas, New Mexico. That's what's up. Yeah, dude, that's a real place, man. It's beautiful up there too, man. Julio, you came all the way down from Pennsylvania to Nuevo Mexico?
I actually, a few weekends ago when we were together at this conference, like sort of pseudo alumni reunion, I remember that what it was that I wanted to go to the program because one of the programs was at the University of Chicago, which at that point was one of my top choices.
Yeah, dude.
But the dates didn't work. The only dates that worked were Albuquerque, and my parents had some family friends, so I went ahead and just flew all the way out there.
Damn. Let me ask a question I've never asked before. Your wife's from El Paso.
Yeah.
She is.
Did you meet her at the New Mexico LDZ?
I sure did not. No, I met her in college, Boston University. She is a proud East Leda Indian, class of '98. So
Right on. Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
Nice. Right on, man. Richie, when did you graduate high school?
2005.
Damn, man. You're
Richie.
young, man. Where'd you graduate from?
Feeling it. Eastwood High School.
Eastwood High.
Yeah.
Okay. Right on. Excellent, man. So we're spitting out a lot of acronyms to our listeners, and they may be wondering, what the heck are you talking about? So what I want to do is give the mic over to Joey and to Julio, both NHI alums. We are all alums of their programs. Some of us are actually quite still affiliated with the program, but we're speaking more about our experience as Latinos who went through a very powerful program that has still united us. I mean, Joey, how long has it been, bro? 14? Now that's like 25 years, over 25 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but there's gaps, and there's like, you got to leave the temple, you got to wander the earth, you got to be away from it for a little while, and we all reunite.
Indeed.
And that's, I guess, our story. But you want to talk a little bit about acronyms before we go into...
I do. I want to introduce to our listeners, what is this organization? It has been around since 1979. It has had a powerful effect on not just the Latino community, but I think where the Latino community is headed for the 21st century, and so powerful that it has still connected us, and many of us, over 25 years as a shared experience. So I want to give that over to you and Julio really quick to just explain to us what is the National Hispanic Institute, and maybe give us a little bit of flavor about what these like kooky programs are and some of the experiences that we went through.
You know, Julio, you do the pitch all the time. You have a consolidated version. Why don't you go ahead and then I'll add some details.
Well, a few weeks ago, we celebrated, I guess I'm still on the job now.
Yeah,
We were supposed to be hanging out, but I guess I don't get to clock. No, I'm kidding. A few weeks ago, we were at this,
so pissed on the drive.
Yeah, go ahead.
A few weeks ago, we were all together at a somewhat alumni reunion, students also learning, but also celebrating 40 years of this organization that we're all affiliated with. And this couple that we've gotten all to know, Ernesto Nieto, Gloria de Leon, Ernesto from Houston, Gloria from the Rio Grande Valley, put together with a lot of parents like Omar's mother and family, together these programs so that their children and Latino youth could be developed as leaders, and not necessarily in the model, or actually not actually at all in the model of trying to create, you know, future Wall Street 1980s style Wall Street tycoon capitalists, nor 1960s, 70s style activists that the future, their future, our future, the one that our kids and we're living in right now, was going to demand a different type of leader with a different set of skills, experiences, and a network of like-minded peers, intellects. And so for 40 years, it's been bringing really sharp, smart, college-bound, ambitious kids together, mostly, not all, but a lot of them Latino, and now from Latin America, bringing them together to really just develop their intellectual brain power, to their intellectual skills, their analytical skills
with each other. I would add that.
Yeah, and having
component.
fun, and making friendships, nerding out about what could be, or what will be, or what we want to be.
Yeah, man,
and we're still in those conversations, and we've seen some things work, we've seen things fail, and then we also are willing to go to the drawing board and erase it and start all over again, where I think we would argue a lot of our community is still in this cycle of having the same conversation with the same approach and the same analysis and the same preparation. And I think we argue that our kids need better and need more and something different than that. And so in different ways, people engage this organization as volunteers, as trustees, as educators, donors. But every year we work with about 3,000 high school kids through these experiences, and engage about another 1,000 volunteers, and work with about 60, 70 colleges that we actively work with and have active dialogue and conversations with.
I want to talk about,
it's pretty fun.
I appreciate you bringing up the colleges. We'll bring that up. It's the 3,000 kids, because we were one of those 3,000. And right now, I think our listeners are like, so what the hell is this? Is this like some kind of think tank? You guys have like a little club and you get together? Like, what is this?
It's a coven. It's a lost tribe.
We go into the woods and do like weird
only
shit.
when we're at the mansion.
Since I was part of in my other life, I've started now becoming an instructor at the local community college here, and working within the early college system and structure that maybe we'll talk about this or another time. Mm-hmm. So I'm working with high school kids out of the NHI, and these are public school kids, pretty good, they have goals, they want to go to college and whatnot, but the thing they have the most difficult time with is thinking and having an opinion. And having an opinion about almost even anything. And it's taken an entire semester of almost gaining students, allowing to be comfortable with just asking questions and putting an opinion on paper. I mean, I'm a humanities instructor, so I deal in a world that doesn't really have a lot of right and wrong, facts, true, false.
It's really it's the substantiation of it.
Exactly, but it's also the study of
lack of that amongst NHIers.
Exactly, but this is also the study of how humans express their thought and their emotions and their feelings and their evolution as this species on the planet. And these kids have a really tough time expressing their intellect. They can recite facts, they can memorize, they can do math, they can bust out a calculator.
That's why they're the best in their school systems. That's what is rewarding.
And the thing is, we're at a point in our century that requires an incredible amount of intellectual power from all communities. Like, we have to rethink the world right now, regardless of what happens next November, or what happens in Israel, or what happens in Europe, or what happens with Brexit. The amount of brain power that the world is going to have to generate to undo this madness that has been created. And our community isn't one of those right now that does a lot.
NHI is like the magic key? Is it what is creating the thinkers that we need for tomorrow? Is that what you're postulating?
I think it is one of the levels in the game where you find the magic key.
Postulate. Yeah, you got one.
So let me back up. Again, our listeners, we need to provide context. They don't know what NHI is. They think it's some happy go time program where we think. So we need to provide context. So we all met. Well, actually, we did not meet through a program. Joe and I met through a program. Julio, you participated in the program.
We met because of a volunteerism model that impacted older people, including your mother, that ultimately pulled us in. And we were around a cluster of people inside of our high schools who were encouraging excellence. And Julio, I think that's how you.
But it was culminating to a program.
Well, yes, but on top of it, the journey, Julio, can you explain how you even found out about NHI all the way from Maxwell, Texas to Pennsylvania? So you were in Lancaster, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of the less than 1% of students that are recruited through a mass mail out to a counselor.
Get out of here.
He's a lucky
You're
shot.
A mass mail out?
Yes.
Wow.
To a random counselor in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania.
That's
not
crazy.
To say Lancaster's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's.
Well, my guess is that based on just the little bit I could find when I got there as an intern is that they were profiling school districts or counties that at that point were at least 25% Latino.
That's where
were they also styling and profiling?
Well, what year is it? Yes.
Learjets!
You always do both.
Limos the size of the block. Woo! I hope that's what the counselor told you as a pitch for you to participate.
There used to be an NHI limousine, in case you didn't know. Dude, Maxwell, Texas is the greatest place on earth.
Oh my
the
God.
border before Lockhart, it's a Yanya's limo company. I don't know if it's still functioning. Is it still functioning? I don't know if he's there. Did we lose Julio?
No, Julio's still there. He's just confused as to what's going on.
Okay, sorry. We're just talking about limousines.
So is Richie.
Hey, so we'll go back to the acronym. Let's talk about what we're alluding to, or I think we're jumping ahead a little bit.
So what I want to do is put a little bit of context. The National Hispanic Institute, NHI, has a variety of summer programs for high school students after their 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade year. There are programs that continue for students in college, the CLN, which is the Collegiate Leadership Network. Exactly. And it's all a bunch of acronyms. Although 9th grade is now the Great Debate.
Yes.
10th grade is LDZ, Lorenzo de Zavala.
Do you know who Lorenzo de Zavala was?
I do. I taught Texas history
wonderful.
for 3 years.
Okay. Well,
he
do you
was
know
the
how he died?
first vice president of the Republic of Texas.
He died of a broken heart.
Is that what he died of?
Yeah, he lost his wife and his son.
Damn.
Yeah, after all that success. Essential figure in Texas
See,
history.
I think that's really important for our listeners to know, because William Barrett Travis, the quote hero of the Alamo, deserted his wife and daughters in Tennessee, leaving them with tens of thousands of dollars in debt, which would almost accrue to like hundreds of thousands now, to come to Texas for his own fame and glory.
Julio, do you know when or why the LDZ changed its name and after its first iteration into the LDZ? What made them bring up Lorenzo de Zavala during that period of time?
That's a good question. It wasn't always called the LDZ.
It was called the YLC, which you were talking about.
No shit.
I just learned this very recently. Yeah, I'm
well,
the early history. Go ahead.
Okay.
It's a little haze. I would say that there was a Young Leaders Conference, which is this original pilot high school conference.
It was a bigger concept.
And there was
Okay.
And there was a segment that was a short mini legislative session.
And it also used some undergraduate students to a small degree.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I don't think it was actually too complicated, other than like, I mean, look at Texas history. You just said it yourself. How many Latinos in the state get memorialized?
Right.
And I mean, and me living here, the only two that I see consistently are going to be Juan Seguin, which you think you would actually see Seguin all over the state, and you don't.
No, he's got a tiny little town.
I think there's actually only 2 high schools in the state that are named Seguin High School, but you have a lot of Bowies, a lot of Austins, a lot of Travises, a lot of Crockett's.
Everywhere.
Anyway, and the Lorenzo de Zavala, which there are a lot of. I don't know why they're always elementary schools, but a lot of the Zavala elementary schools.
Oh yeah, we have a Zavala elementary school here in El Paso. Good point. And we have a Bowie high school. Shouldn't have a high school. Jim Bowie.
And I do think, and I think the other more symbolic side of it,
occupation,
indeed,
is that I believe that the Ernesto, the park that his family, I believe, it was called De Zavala Park.
And I think the founder of the National Hispanic Institute is from Houston. The park that he frequented was De Zavala Park. It brings it all together. Thus, the Lorenzo de Zavala Youth Legislative Session, the 10th grade program.
You could say that we are 3 of the people that probably know more about the history, but we still are uncovering so much because we came at a later time. We came 20 years after this when a lot of things have changed. A lot of issues for teenagers in America, and particularly in Texas at that time, were changing. But that early 1979 through 1983, 84 period, these were very creative people, closer to our age now, that were really trying something very innovative and new, and were really breaking new territory. But much like, say, the early days of Power at the Pass, it was completely idea-driven and a lot of service-heavy projects that were targeting people that did not understand why the hell would you first of all invest in Latino kids of all kids?
I know.
And why would you think they would go to college?
Right? What? We went to college?
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
So
you said something crazy. You and maybe both of you know this. Omar, you might know this. I mean, well, you probably know more in your field. Like Ernesto, and I don't know the chronology, but I'm sure there's like an education history you could do of what would have a 1970s special education, 1960s urban special education teacher be learning, or how would they be prepared, or how would they be, what kind of classrooms are getting thrown into. So in a weird way, I think you were saying, Joey, that like a lot of the early methodology or pedagogy that Ernesto was trained in is actually late 20th century special education theory.
Okay, that's an interesting statement, and it took me a while to kind of figure this out. So you mentioned the space in the park in Magnolia. His parents were, people very accustomed to working with young people of all kinds of different backgrounds, including learning disabilities. And what they used was sports and games, and they could build all kinds of capabilities and confidence within kids that way. And I think Ernie really had magnificent parents and lived in a different era where he was participating and seeing a lot of the stuff. He was also a talented athlete. He was good in kind of like a variety of different coaching and training contexts himself personally.
Yeah.
But I believe he was also studying special education, correct, Julio, when he went to college?
I think more so, I think it was his graduate work at U of H and HISD. I've actually always wanted to ask him. He was like
a couple of credits away from finishing a master's, if I'm not mistaken. But in the end, a lot of that foundation in educational models, I would say, that is infused inside of this thing that's geared towards college-bound kids. It's based off of early techniques that were effective with special education populations. And before he started translating them into context for high school kids, what Bernie and I were talking about recently was that his original business model was to provide leadership training for professionals, professional Latinos who, in his era, you're talking LBJ forward in government, you could be a guy from El Paso like Richie, who is suddenly representing a large-scale region that is still very segregated, dealing with a lot of tensions, a lot of upheaval, and you suddenly have a level of potency politically and also in terms of your federal responsibilities of making sure certain policies are upheld, that it was causing a lot of burnout. Because someone coming from El Paso County or Zavala County or Cameron County or whichever,
the Latinos are getting burnt out. Like these professionals.
You might have a great experience at Texas Western College or UT or whatever it was at the period of time that you came up with, but you weren't accustomed to being in a high-speed world where you were a very underrepresented person. And this is the men in particular he's focused on. Gloria can tell you a little bit differently about what it was like to be a woman in these contexts too, but what he saw personally in his own experience in his own realm, both with Latino professionals and many other groups, was just a type of fatigue that could cause like an intellectual meltdown and a cultural crisis.
Jeez.
And so,
I think the other
about kind of addressing that and building competencies and strengths and having in the form of support. Really, I think it's what you and I and Julio also still rely on when we get together.
Yeah,
because there's no other bubble
correct
that could re-strengthen, not only your constitution, so to speak, to address everything, but also to just contemplate what the hell you're going through as a 20th century man.
Right, exactly. Which is a very valid point. Also, 2 25-cent words for you.
Thank you.
Julio, you were going to say something, and then I want to quickly
I think that it's what I gather when I listen to your podcast, and I hear your conversations, or as Joseph said, ours, or that you have with other similar-minded folks, is that even if you look at Ernie and Gloria, like, she comes with a social work training, but also did organizing. They both worked in government, but in different kind of aspects of it. They were both in civil rights, but at different points and different approaches to it. And in the end, that just made a great team that I think together, those experiences together, really provided a really comprehensive approach to all types of Latinos that you were going to potentially meet along the way.
But
I think that these teams are bringing in and complementing all these different assets and talents. I think these like mixed approaches is really kind of how we are as a community. And I think that those are some of the things in education I get concerned is we don't give ourselves enough credit for the complexity of it all.
It is so complex. I mean, I think there's a term related now that's more in vogue, which is like that intersectionality discussion that's happening. It is what they were dealing with in a very raw manner without the nomenclature, to be working with poor rural communities, to be working with all kinds of other sectors than just Latino populations. At the time, although it still was Texas, it was still small. Yeah. In terms of representation nationally, and even in the highest concentrations within 200 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, like it just was not a very massive population. It had its really high concentration areas, but beyond that, they were working in other communities. So they had context. But the way power was being wielded ultimately did not merge well with making your voice heard about how this one sector represents an opportunity that we should invest in and grow. It's still almost alien language to bring up to people that, hey, in El Paso, our greatest resource is not some type of rare mineral, oil, or petroleum refining capability or something like whatever it was.
Copper, I believe.
Copper was being smelted, among other things.
That's the miners.
But our reservoir of talent is the thing that we cultivate and extract, and we export it everywhere else. Yeah. And so, like, there's this core cultural ability, or intellectual ability, I should say, that's within this cultural community that I think they saw early on could be so much. Magnolia could be so much, could be something to learn from. And a mindset shift really occurs in the 70s that they institutionalized. They experimented a lot in the early days, But by the time we came up, and I think this is where it's a little more relevant to what we're seeing today, is that in the early days, these programs were trying to help people who were first generation college goers adapt to and thrive within a college setting that's far removed from home.
Mm-hmm.
And so that exposure to college campuses that's tied to a lot of all NHI programs, almost all of them,
Mm-hmm.
is there to familiarize you with a world that is different than what you might be accustomed to, with different expectations and different standards and so forth. But excellence was going to help you be very effective in time, collaboration, and confidence in competition and so forth.
Yeah, it's giving it's a skill set,
but you
to a
would
group
not,
of people that may not have had that skill set.
your high school's not going to be like, hey, you know what's going to happen to you down the road? We need to work on this. This was what a responsible nonprofit should do: build the scaffolding within the community.
And I think it was a reactive approach rather than like what's the current proactive approach.
I think if you're working with students at that period of time, it's a necessity that is amongst the majority. Maybe not that second generation, third generation kid who was still there back then, but by the time you and I came up, we're a different representation. I think Julio as well. We're a Clinton era, multicultural, college bound with access and funding to go to great schools. And there's this massive, like, you could say, like, NHI is magnifying not only the reservoir of talent, but then it supercharges it to be highly represented at schools like Stanford.
Let me bring that into context for our listeners. So here's what's going on. The Latino community was essentially being looked at disparagingly in the United States.
They've looked at it all.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, like, arguably, like, still to this day, kind of like, oh, like, but you're like a gardener.
You know,
maybe we have a little bit more nuance.
Perspective. It was a population of 4 million.
As opposed to now,
compared to now. Like, now, this makes total sense.
Exactly.
El Paso was a majority white city during this period of time.
But even then, I think what happened was that Ernesto Nieto, who's the president and founder of NHI, said, this is like bullshit. Latinos are brilliant and creative and have inordinate potential, and no one's really doing anything to bring out the potential of them. So he started, I guess, with these professional programs. What it is now morphed to are these high school programs. For example, the 9th graders will go off to a college, as Joey mentioned, away from their town. In this case, let's say Austin College, which is one of our partner colleges.
One side, in order for them to be able to do this, a community effort would need to be mobilized with volunteers and a recruitment campaign, participating schools and so forth, and they would be prepared. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're perfect, exactly. Yeah. So what happens is that they go off to this thing called the Great Debate, and you walk into this palace of Latinos that are all badass.
And you've never been around before.
Yeah, ever. And you're
that with 400. Right?
Oh, like, shit. Like, I'm not the only one. Because we all thought we were the only, like, smart Latino, or, like, the only Latino in several occasions in our, like, AP classes or high
Was it
schools.
25% of your high school?
I remember just being like, no way are there this many smart Latinos in the world. And two, wow, living on a border with Latin America? How awesome would that be? Yeah. Man, I wish I could live there.
As opposed to being like the one Latino in like a 500-mile radius.
Yes, you dwarfed by the Mennonite community.
I saw those guys when I was out there. Yeah, I saw the Quaker Oats guy. He was driving something, and it wasn't a car. So what happens is they all go to this program, and they compete against each other
regionally
in, so I'll explain that in a second. They compete against each other in things like cross-ex and mock trial, oratory, and extemp. And the way, like Joey's right, it's all organized as local teams that are fueled by volunteers and oftentimes high school students who participate in the program. Joey and I are a perfect example. So when I was a participant in mock trial, Joey was our senior counselor. So he was training us on, here's what you have to look forward to, and here's how to get your shit together so that you don't get smeared against teams like Austin and Houston.
Wait,
Texas,
he taught this?
Yeah, stop. I wouldn't say I taught this. I would say I was not with, well, this is like ancient history, but what was so important, I think what your mother was really doing was making sure that people who had grown a lot from this experience of competition and debate had the ability to improve themselves further, and not just in terms of speaking, but in terms of working as an organized team, and to really be competitive for volunteer opportunities. Yeah. And in that, you served in a variety of different functions. Mock trial was not exactly the domain I was involved in. It was more of the individual stuff. Right. But But yeah, I know you were shocked to hear I would have been involved in Omar's OMOF trial training. No, I did not. I just made sure he got on the bus.
He was.
Yeah.
He was. I learned so much from Joseph.
I have no recollection.
You said make fun.
So this is what was going on, and then like you finish this program, you're like, what's next? Then you go to the LDZ, the Learn to the Civil Youth Legislative Session
for twice as long.
Yeah, it is a week-long program, and like, dude, you're not told what is happening or what the rules are. You're not told shit. You're literally just thrown into.
It's like a bad
room.
film noir. You wake up, you've been hit in the head. You don't know exactly what's going on. You're following strands that don't lead to anything, and it's just terrifying.
So the ninth grade program has like structure. You know what's going to happen. You're prepared. You've got your arguments. I'm going to be in mock trial. I'm going to be in CX.
I got a team of people that support me. I got this person's mom and these other moms looking out for me in case I get hurt or sick.
LDC is
so
like
hampered.
Fucking Attica, dude. It is just straight up Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
It is like you're thrown into this room, you and 300 billion Latinos. You have a tyrannical Secretary of State that is in charge and in power and telling you what to do.
And you better
literally
put
have
it together
to figure it out and figure out through parliamentary procedure, through developing coalitions, through developing then coalitions into political parties and parliamentary rules, how to oust the Secretary of State, have elections, put yourself in power, and then pass legislation that's
and be effective within hundreds of kids.
Right.
That are easily as talented as you.
Oh yeah, way more.
In the 1990s version of the game.
In the 1990s version, you're so well. Yes. Well, that's cold, man. That is some cold. That is so hard.
Has it evolved?
Dude,
are people all fucking
he's
nice
basically
and
saying
shit
we're
now?
very antiquated in our memory.
Oh yeah, there's the publication of legal opinions. There's the Supreme Court is integrated fully. Oh, there's a bunch of twists and turns that didn't exist before.
It's working, buddy.
It's hot. So hot right now.
Hot stuff.
So what we're trying to get at here is that
it's a different skill.
Yeah, this organization basically, going back to what Joey was saying about Ernesto Nieto in that park, was saying the education that's going on in our schools is not the kind of education that is working for us.
And it's never going to bring up these topics.
And it brings up what Julio said. These kids to this day can't come up with fucking opinions and with thoughts of their own, and it's not their fault. This is a byproduct of the system. So Ernie said, we have to get completely out of the system and develop something brand new outside of the system that kids are going to participate in, that is not some lecture, that is not some PowerPoint, it's a game. And like LDZ was fucking amazing, but it was a game, but it was nuts. You had to literally creatively problem solve and figure everything out because no one was telling you what to do.
Can I have one thing?
Yeah, man.
Ernie mentioned to me, like, we all get pulled into these rides with Ernie in the truck sometimes.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Or
Ernesto Nieto in his famous pickup truck rides, where he looks at me, he's like, listen, you son of a bitch. You ain't shit. You ain't never gonna be shit. And then he, stops the car and throws me out. And I'm like, yeah, man, good time.
Sounds like a rite of passage.
Yeah, dude.
Pretty regular stuff. But something was like, whether you're a participant or a volunteer, like how you comport yourself in that 8-day period is pretty much a great preview of how you're going to function when you get to college and you get to grad school. And it always stuck out to me because, it's a simulated reality. It's completely constructed. It's a competitive game. You have a lot of breakthroughs intellectually. Regardless of the format, you're going to build bonds that are going to be, really well established, and you're going to be in a different part of the country, and you're going to have higher expectations.
Yep.
But when that all is over, and you have those skills and you have those relationships, you also are now at a point in your life where you're 16 or 17, and you got to figure out what the hell you're going to do when this game of high school is over. And then this is where Roy Nieto, comes into a moment of his own in the mid-90s, which we got to be a part of. Yeah. So you want to explain that one?
I will explain the CWS in just a second. I want to circle back to Julio in just a bit. So the CWS, the Collegiate World Series, is the 11th grade program, and it's a game. It teaches students about the college entrance process. And then the second part of it is called IBL, Inquiry-Based Learning, and it's a competitive tournament of students literally learning how to think and how to react to things in a definitive structure. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Kind of like the scientific formula. Yeah. It's a bit like that in terms of, okay, so I now have to ask the questions, and I got to do a little bit of research, and then I have to debase the hypothesis. It's somewhat similar to that process, but what it does is give students structure so that when they're faced with a highly complicated scenario in their real life, we call it IBLing. It's like, hey, I'm going to IBL this situation.
Julio, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, that is it. I think that how do this thinking thing happen is really just by giving them these huge challenges that they may get in graduate school or may face in their mid-30s, but we give it to them now.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I bring up Roy and Ethel because they were very effective programs, the first two of them, for the kids that were already getting exposed to college fairs and so forth, and the bonds with college members that were hosting programs had also grown. But Roy was really innovative in making sure that, you know, how you think about what is ahead, and it had a lot of experimental phases, and I think we got to be part of it when we worked actually at the Institute together for some different variations of this. But ultimately that thought, I mean, in most communities, this statistic kind of changes a little bit over each generation at NHI, but there is a portion of these students who have no one in their family has been through this.
Correct.
And so,
I mean, a lot of these kids, like, they're the first one to go through college.
Well, but also, I think whether you're fortunate to have a parent that has a degree or not, like when you're 16 or 17 and you're trying to even formulate essays about who the hell you are, who the hell are you? When have you ever talked about it? And do you have friends that are even helping you?
Who are you, Joey?
You know what?
Who are you, Richie? Richie, who are you?
What's up, Richie?
What's up?
Why didn't you do NHI programs at Eastwood?
We did have them, I think.
Yeah, but why didn't you do it?
I don't even know. I was thinking about that when you guys were talking about this. Like, it would have been really cool, dude, to have done that. I was already involved with a lot. I think that was one thing. Yeah, I was in sports and creative writing program, band,
too busy,
and just. I remember. My girlfriend was in
Is this the first time
I remember you saying that NHI?
Huh?
Is this the first time you've heard about NHI?
No, he had a girlfriend who was in NHI.
Yeah.
In the day.
Oh, no shit. Okay.
Because Eastwood was well represented.
It was super well represented. Yeah.
She was smart. So I'm like, man, I remember hearing about all the trips and everything. That's really cool.
The trips are really a clear memory to me as well. They were like little lifetimes, you know, but so Julio, the other thing about NHI that I think, you know, is important to say is that it's also geared at volunteers. And that to some degree, if you're a volunteer for many years in NHI, you get to grow in so many additional ways than are just expected of participants at programs in terms of pulling it off, because all these programs are participant led.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because this is where I want to chime in with Julio, and then we're going to start wrapping up, and then we'll do, we're almost at an hour already.
Jesus,
we're going to be part 2 and maybe even part 3 of this. Here's this program and this organization was minute. Started 1979 at a time, like Joseph said, where we were like 4 million people. Julio, what is the expanse of the program now? How many alumni, how many programs, how many countries? Since 1979, with one tiny ass little project at like Concordia College, from what I remember.
First one at LBGA School of Public Affairs.
Oh, wow. At UT?
Yeah.
So
where? And then Concordia. Across the street
right.
before it was DeMoss.
That's right. Good call. Where is it now, Julio?
You're about 17 programs, 7 countries, 30 U.S. states.
Damn. How many alumni?
I'll let the demographer answer that.
The number can be a little unclear. We're trying to make sure that this is closer to accurate, but I would say between 55 and 60,000.
Yeah.
At that period of time, they started off with about 200 kids, just to put into perspective.
Exactly.
And those were people that did the full programs. I mean, it gets larger if you count. I mean, there were a lot of weekend programs, pilots, grant-based programs, middle school. I mean, if you throw all that in, there's thousands more kids that had an experience.
But we're talking pretty much 55 to 60,000 alumni.
With a predictable, but that alumni is impressive. You know? But the future alumni, to me, are going to be rock stars, the ones from 10 years ago and right now, who were born like closer to the 90s.
Yeah.
The organization is it's serving about 3,400 3,438 if I'm not mistaken. And we saw a gathering of 343 kids with 5 or 6 undergraduate students as well. You look at that population, and it's about 60%, 55, 58% female majority at programs. I would say just about right. Maybe at certain programs it's a much higher, but there's a slight female majority. when you look at this group as well, their identities are really complex, you know, how they identify. But what's really unifying about them is that they look at the future in terms of their education pretty much in the same consistent way that we did, and they were college-bound, college-focused, graduate school-oriented, and they're proclaiming this at 15 or 16. So they're looking at the amassment of educational credentials and success. They know that that's going to happen, but what's emerging in them is how they look at leadership, how they look at the future. And if we don't pay attention to how they understand these concepts, we don't really get to.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I want to segue into for the next show is we talked a lot about the history of this organization, kind of where it come from, what were the reasons why. And what I want to segue the next show into is really about where is it going? Because I think the leadership model, I'm glad, has evolved and changed, because dude, I mean, it used to be like, for us in the 90s, there was some element of like collaborate and get together, but it was really all about like, fuck that, beat the shit out of these people, be the best. It was kind of hardcore 80s Wall Street.
There was a 20th century NHI that's different than the 20th century.
Exactly.
But I think it all
just like
changed.
any organization, but the evolution of it.
Well, I would say that everything changed in 2001 at Loma Linda 2.
What the fuck's Loma Linda? Which is the
NHI had a Woodstock.
Yes.
Too, so to speak. Who was there? Who were the bands that were there?
Ozo Motley.
Ozo Motley played when they built the stage.
Oh.
The first Loma Linda was not successful because of weather. And so
los Thunderbirds, ahí estaban o no? Los fabulous Thunderbirds a la chingada.
No, I think Little Joe played. Did Little Joe play too?
Little Joe definitely was.
Yes.
There. I remember that shit.
Pretty much, yeah. He's I think the stage is
brought the Tigres and shit.
But there was also some emerging actors, right, Julio? Yeah.
George?
I think it was Nick Gonzalez in his Showtime era and Eva Longoria.
So like in 2001 was the first time I ever saw NHI Maxwell headquarters. And I think a lot of us had been away from the Institute or the organization for a number of years, just because, you go to school, you go far away.
Yeah. We were in college, some of us.
But Julio, you were there, right? You were there too?
In 2001?
In 2001.
It was my 21st birthday weekend. Yes, it was my 21st birthday weekend.
It was a great gathering, but it was one of these kind of moments where, it was like having an NHI program for adults, but we got to all listen to music and wander around this massive property. And
it's fucking dope. I don't know why that
it was so cool. And I thought that was like a normal thing they did. That was the only one that was ever. They had spotlights, like they're doing this thing on the board right now. They had that going on in the middle of the
Batman lights.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Maxwell, this is like across the freeway from San Marcos and a little bit south of Lockhart, right? And
which is south of Austin, Texas.
This is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of
puro pinche granja.
It was, and this facility I had never been to before. It was originally a plantation, correct, Julio?
Get the fuck out of here!
That was a plantation.
I don't think it was.
Have you ever seen the photos?
I don't think it was a plantation. I think it was reconstruction. It was reconstruction.
Oh my God, man. Okay, there was a very
I love it, man.
East of I-35.
The plantation.
It was.
Taking it back.
They owned the entire region.
Hey, man, we were farming the land.
They were that whole area from Fredericksburg and all. That was all like a German enclave, right?
Yeah.
And so this was, if I'm not mistaken, the Shavi family, correct, Julio?
Yes, it was German-owned tycoons, brought money. I think in one point there were like several banks in that little downtown.
The depression affects everything.
But yeah, the depression is speculated and lost everything.
And so like the piece that was there, eventually NHI, which had started off as a small nonprofit in the heart of downtown Austin, floats around a little bit. It eventually purchases this older property south of Austin. I mean, no one was really aware of it, and Ernie and Gloria had the right kind of eyes.
Yeah.
And they saw this is the place. And then years later, 2001, we're there rocking out to Ozo Motley. They played a conch. They actually grabbed a shell and played a song
like
with
Aquaman.
Dude, pretty much. It was a great show. Dominic describes it as like throwing money off the top of a building and running downstairs trying to catch it with like a suitcase. It was not a successful event financially, but it was profoundly impact. We should put one of those posters up in here. It was a beautiful show.
It's
great
a
art,
poster.
everything about it. But like right after that, Julio starts working because that's the summer you finish
And
college.
you're saying that this was where I think NHI made a huge turn.
That show was
shift.
1 month after 9/11.
Oh.
And so everything had changed in Austin. The economy had changed.
I mean, everything changed.
Smaller.
The world changed.
Everywhere
Everything
was
in the
different.
United States changed.
Security was completely different, but like NHI to me, at this period of time, I've been in Austin for a little over a year in grad school, and it was like terra firma. At that point, I'd never known that what rural life in Texas was really like. And you know, you see this thing, you have this moment, you reconnect a lot of people, and that's where you and I work together. You know, that's where Julio was coming from work right now.
Yeah.
And instead of like, you know, working the land, the institute now has a systematic, you know, approach to it, like the rest of the country.
And the perfect segue. So what I want to do is get us to start wrapping up and give final thoughts about this. Next time around, listeners, we're going to start chiming in on what was this transition, where is NHI going for the 21st century Latino, what the hell is a 21st century Latino, what the hell is a Latino? These are like big fucking questions that we have yet to really address, but it's all embedded within this brilliant educational program that started in 1979 that has brought people like Joey, Julio, and I together for now 25 years. Some of us in a similar suit with friends like Manny Jimenez and Alvaro Soria across the country that we're still very good friends with. And what we want to discuss is less about us and more about where is the program going with kids now?
Well, and you know, Omar, one last thing I would say.
Yeah, so final thoughts.
I think final thought that probably sets up your next conversation is, I think that what we maybe failed to articulate
that conversation.
I think what we failed, what I failed to articulate is, I think that aside from the great programs, skills, developing the mind, developing the intellect, which we all know could be used for evil, is that the ethos of the organization is rooted in harnessing, harvesting, cultivating, mining, investing resources, equity within the community. And to shift from this perspective or analytical structure or perspective that views and presumes Latinos to be deficient in any way, even if it's just to dispel your mind for a week at a program, that to believe, and just for even a week, that everything about the community has value and equity. And, you know, even if we watch the punditry, the news, that is not the rhetoric and the narrative that you hear by any party, any voice, and an education. It's always from that one perspective. And I think that our programs introduce kids, even for a week, to a completely different prism to look at the world through.
Yeah, I mean, it is mind-changing. Absolutely. Well said. Joey, final thoughts?
I would never have the network of young, bright intellectuals that I did growing up if it hadn't been for your mother's efforts to bring together 40 or 80 kids from around the city. El Paso is very tribal, as you know, it's regionally divided. And I could have been locked up in my own little world and stayed attached to my cable TV and my values that are tied from it, you know, and are tied to it. And would have had a very predictable pathway had it not been for an idea that took root many years prior that impacted my sister. It was encouraged by my parents. That was supported by your mother. And I never would have found the bonds I have with you guys had we not had a portion of our 20s, really a significant part of our lives, actually, you know, that brought us together to do you know, a variety of different initiatives for the next generation. And now all those kids that we worked with 15 years ago are 30. And I bump into them at grocery stores and parking lots and at special events in San Antonio. And so there's a lot I want to talk about the future, Omar. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about the past of NHI, but to me, you know, we're living it and we have responsibility for those that are coming next.
Exactly. Richie, any final thoughts on this subject, brother?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion on future. What is Latino, Latina? And I'm thinking, you know, on this talk of education, I remember this art piece I saw at Mercado Mayapan back in the day.
We can show it on the video.
Yeah, it says, don't be and they'll get an education. It just speaks to our ability to free think, you know, and actualize ourselves as thinkers. So I look forward to those future discussions.
Yeah, and those critiques of education.
Exactly. The systems
that we all submit in our own radical ways.
So well said, everybody. To tie a couple things together, so we have a very special bond here in El Paso. My mom started working as a volunteer for the National Hispanic Institute here regionally in El Paso for the 9th grade program, and really kind of kept everything organized
for a decade, 1990 to 2000.
For about 10 years. So what she did was pretty profound. She went into every single high school in El Paso, gave a presentation. It was pretty hardcore, and said, like, we're looking for the best of the best. Like, you want a piece of this or not? And what she wound up doing, which was brilliant, was a microcosm for what NHI is doing, which is she brought together kids from West Side El Paso and East Side El Paso that never would have met had it been for this program. I would not know a Joseph Villescas. I would know Erica Salta, who I'm still very good friends with. Shout out to Erica, who just contributed to the El Paso Leadership Academy.
Awesome.
Still friends with her. She's doing kick-ass stuff, dude. She's brilliant. Amani Jimente. And then take that, and she built this really beautiful, I would arguably say, like, empire for like 10 years of people from a Latino background meeting other brilliant Latinos, then formed a circle of support for one another within El Paso that is a perfect microcosm for what NHI has done nationally. There's nothing in the world I wouldn't do for Julio Cotto, who I met through NHI, and no other reason that I would have met him for, because the man's from Lancaster, fucking Pennsylvania, hanging out with the Amish.
Tornadoes, baby, tornadoes.
And cocaine, it turns out. The Amish selling cocaine. Or which group? Is that the Quakers? No, it's not the Quakers. It's some group.
Hey, there's some state reps in our state over here now on the border selling cocaine apparently too.
Hey,
this is true. I also
breaking news! Breaking news! Breaking news!
Uncovered cocaine in like Brazil or something. Anyways, I never would have met Julio if it hadn't been for this. So the organization is bringing together brilliant folks, keeping them together, and keeping these bonds. It's not just about the programs that we participated in that changed our lives, changed our paradigms, made us into the creative problem solvers, into the critical thinkers, and kind of like the tough badasses that all NHI folks really are. And I just saw these kids participate, and damn, like the kids coming up today are brilliant and eloquent and thoughtful. And Julio, like as you saw, because you were masters of ceremonies, fucking super duper opinionated and substantiating their opinion. It's going to be incredible what they do. So in wrap up, I just want to say we did a wonderful job of celebrating what NHI is. Julio, I hope you'll come back for the next one to say what NHI will be and the future of Latinos. Richie, I hope you'll come back. Joseph, you in?
You got it.
Right on. So what I want to do really quickly is first just shout out the carnales. Julio, thank you so much for joining us, man. Any final words?
I'm in El Paso for 36 hours next week. Maybe we can grab a coffee.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I forgot you're coming. Is it next week?
Awesome.
Wow.
Okay. Would love to see you, man. Joseph, any final words?
I still love you guys.
Love you too, brother.
I'm happy to do this for you.
Richie, huge shout out to you, our sound engineer. Thank you so much. Any final words, brother?
No, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming on. Peace.
Love you, man.
Next time.
So the show depends on our listeners. Thank you so much. We want to hear from you. Dude, we started hearing from you guys a lot more on Twitter and through email. So please keep it up. You can find us at EPW Podcast on Twitter, _EPW Podcast on the gram, EPWpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever it may be. So from all of us, carnales, in El Paso on I-35 driving to Austin, thank you so much for listening in. Y quiero decir buenas noches, muchísimas gracias, y buena suerte. Peace.
Bye.
That was fun.